The Clinton administration is casting its cost-cutting eye towards prescription drugs. Prices in the U.S. are the highest in the world, but whispers of possible price controls have the pharmaceutical drug industry gulping aspirin and mobilizing an emergency corps of lobbyists to try to keep the government's hands off prices. Special assignment correspondent Brooks Jackson has our Monday report, Prescription for Profit.
What's being manufactured here are not just pharmaceuticals, but profits. Profits that have become a political target. Just listen to what they're saying in Washington.
There's just a lot of room for reducing drug prices.
All of these other countries have price controls on prescription medications.
They're very rich and I must say very stubborn.
Compared to other countries, our prices are shocking.
A huge lobbying battle has begun over drug profits and prices. Profits that are the fattest of any legal industry, prices that are the highest in the world. To understand how high, just stroll across the border into Mexico.
Cheaper than Kmart today. Come in, over here.
U.S. tourists used to come here looking for bargains in silver, leather, and liquor. Now the big attraction in Nogales and other Mexican border towns is medicine.
If you look at the pharmacies,
We came here with Stanley King, a retired U.S. businessman who buys his stomach medication in Mexico.
what is that? Is Pepsidine?
Sold in Mexico as Pepsidine and in the U.S. as Pepsid, it's the same stomach drug made by the same company.
The last time I priced these in the States, the last time was 3 years ago, and the same quantity at that time was $90.
And what are you going to pay here today?
Okay, we'll see. $30. $30.10.
One-third what you would have paid 3 years ago.
Exactly.
We found plenty of other big price differences.
$23, that's for 150 milligrams, 60 tablets? Boy, that's a big difference.
Look, for example, at Zantac for ulcers. $83.25 in an Arizona pharmacy. In Mexico, there's a small difference in the spelling, but a big difference in the price. $23. Ventolin inhalers for asthma. $20.02 in the U.S., $5.55 in Mexico. The big drug manufacturers say they have to sell their brand name products for less here because Mexicans just can't afford to pay as much. And because Mexico gives them no patent protection, so cheap generic drugs compete much sooner. Here on the Mexican side of the border is not the only place where pharmaceuticals are far cheaper than in the United States. The same thing is true far to the north in Canada. On the Canadian side of Niagara Falls, where the standard of living is close to the U.S., brand name drugs still sell for an average of about one-third less. In Niagara Falls, New York, the stomach medicine Tagamet costs $85. But in Canada, just across the border in Niagara Falls, Ontario, it sells for $40.25. The antibiotic Ceclor sells for $33.75 on the U.S. side of the falls, $20.96 on the Canadian side. Canadian pharmacist Jennifer Schoons explains the difference.
Why are prices lower?
In Canada, because we have more regulations.
More regulations. The Canadian government controls prices.
We have an agency that looks at drug prices across Canada. And here in Ontario, we have the Ontario Drug Benefit Program, which dictates the majority of pricing.
And it's that Canadian example that the U.S. drug industry is desperately lobbying Congress to avoid, because price controls are now a serious possibility.
I think price controls are the last resort. but they're leaving us no alternative.
No alternative. Talk like that worries top drug executives.
Right now we're demonized and vilified beyond recognition, and there is no doubt that we are not very popular, either in this administration or with the public in general.
The trouble is drug prices. After falling in the 60s and rising less than inflation in the 70s, they just exploded in the 80s, rising nearly twice as fast as other prices.
The 80s were the go-go time. Everybody was raising prices no matter what you were talking about.
A prescription that cost $10 in 1982 cost $23.82 this year. And that's just the average. Many consumers were hit even harder.
And about every other letter that I receive and the aging committee receives are from people who simply cannot buy their drugs any longer.
We're unpopular because our little pills cost so much, and we haven't made a very good case as to why those pills do cost that much and what they do for human health.
To make their case, pharmaceutical companies are spending millions for well-connected lawyers and lobbyists and public relations experts.
Thank you.
Here are just a few examples. Republican James Lake, his connection, George Bush's deputy campaign manager, his company's client, the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, Howard Baker, former Senate Republican leader. Now he's lobbying the Clinton White House for his client, the Shearing Plow Drug Company. Former Congressman Burl Anthony, his connection, he used to write tax laws as a member of the Ways and Means Committee. His current mission, saving the drug industry's tax haven in Puerto Rico. Jody Powell, former White House press secretary to President Carter, now working for Glaxo and 6 other drug companies in a group called RX Partners.
They're going to hire the best people that they can, and they're going to do it because they have the money to do it.
Jody Powell wrote this memo telling drug clients, quote, "The Clinton administration has chosen the industry as public enemy number 1. To improve their image, he proposed a program costing $2 million.
When the 936 tax code was established,
Now Powell is running a 90-day public relations blitz, including breakfast briefings of reporters by top pharmaceutical executives.
Historically, it's indisputable price controls haven't worked. Legislated price controls haven't worked.
Drug companies are also spending money to orchestrate grassroots pressure on Congress. In this letter, Johnson & Johnson urges its own stockholders to share your views with your elected representative.
But now you can look into the inner recesses of the cell.
The lobbying strategy is to emphasize the industry's expensive research. In this building, Glaxo is working on a cure for cancer, and it has lots of other laboratories.
Well, in research worldwide, we spend about $1 billion, and which is an incredible sum when you think about it.
$1 billion on research.
$1 billion in research.
Well, not too bold. What was Glaxo's profit last year?
Well, it was somewhat in advance of that, as a matter of fact. But of course, you have to pay dividends out of that.
Of every dollar consumers spent last year on drugs, 11.5 cents went to profits. Another 16 cents did go to research, but even more, 22.5 cents went to marketing and advertising. And some went for campaign contributions. Drug company political action committees, or PACs, gave $2.4 million to Senate and House candidates last year, up 25%. And the drug companies themselves gave nearly $1.4 million more directly to the Democratic and Republican parties.
It's essentially our way of getting a place at the table again. If you're not involved in the process, then your view may not be represented, and the stakes are too high not to be at the table.
The drug industry is at the table now, negotiating with the Clinton team, offering to hold down prices voluntarily. But to prevent any mandatory price controls, they're prepared to fight it out in Congress, using their lobbyists and their money. And some say that fight will be like David versus Goliath.
Well, the David in this picture would be the elderly people the poor people, the sick people who no longer can afford their prescription drugs. There's the David. The Goliath is the drug industry. And now David and Goliath are getting ready to meet.
Those drug industry lobbyists will be even more active in a few weeks when the Clinton administration's healthcare task force releases its report. Charles?
Brooks, is there another David and Goliath battle here with all the lobbyists and the money? Is that Goliath versus the David of the Clinton administration? Who's going to win?
Well, the Clinton administration probably has the upper hand in this struggle. In fact, for two reasons. One is that the pharmaceutical industry, in fact, for all its wealth, is rather small. It's concentrated in just a few states, and just a few congressional districts, so it doesn't have that many natural allies in Congress, and that's a disadvantage. The other reason is that it's terrifically unpopular. There are public opinion polls showing that pharmaceutical companies are less popular than lawyers or lobbyists, and that's not a good place to be.
All right, we'll see what David does against that. Brooks Jackson of Special Assignment. We'll be back with more of Our World Today in a moment.